Let's welcome Hina Khan.
Of Team Bovey. Hi, Zara. Hi, Jacqueline. Hello, everybody. Okay. There is somebody else that I need to recognize before we start. Where is she? Where is she? Where is she? There she is, looking around like it's not me. Can't be me. Who was she talking about? There's a woman here who, whenever I was at an event of Bob's, Bob would always recognize Gina. Gina had been working with him for 30 plus years. And it was actually in those moments that I saw how Bob would always, whether it was in front of people or not, recognize the people that he worked with and that worked with him, because he knew that they were really the magic in what was created. Well, the magic is here. Gina, will you stand up, please? We may have to do another event, Gina, where it's just the stories. The stories of you and Bob racing through airports. The stories of setting up the chalkboard, because back in the day, that's what it was. And making sure that it was perfectly clean before the next event would happen. All of the stories. Gina is a wealth of knowledge. If you have the opportunity to say hello to her, make sure you do. She's incredible. And Gina also knows our special guest very well, because Doug worked with Bob and with Gina. Doug is an incredible mentor and coach, and what you're going to understand from this conversation is how in love he is with your possibility. How in love he is with the idea of you becoming the best version of yourself. We're going to talk to him about his story, about this book, this very compelling book. And I think if you don't leave here understanding that really anything is possible, and that if there's anything that you desire, you can have it. I mean, if this conversation doesn't do it for you, I don't know what will. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming my friend, Doug Dane. Cool. Have a seat, Doug. So I've known Doug for many years, and I knew Doug, I knew your story high level, but I didn't know your story. I have to be honest with you. There were many times when this book was very hard to read. Doug says in the book on page 11, I was adopted as a 6-month-old baby. The parents chosen for me were both alcoholics. Every day was a ritual of abuse and survival, permeated by the stink of stale beer and cigarettes amid the squalor of a living room turned into my mother's bedroom. My dad had to have a lock on his bedroom door because my mom, drunk and violent every day, would instigate fights with him. Often my brother and I would be assigned bizarre, crazy-making chores. On one occasion, my mother made me paint the living room to cover up the beer and blood stains on the walls from her fights with my father. Other times, I would have to roll cigarettes for her while she ran around the house yelling and screaming. Shame became my constant companion. And my first question for you, Doug, is what was the effects of shame being your constant companion?
I think for most of my life, I was walking around with this feeling of what was wrong with me. And the story, a lot of people don't know this, but the part of the story that Hina just read didn't come out until I was 39. So it was pretty much all blocked out. I remember growing up, my parents were drinkers and stuff like that. This idea, and I didn't really understand the whole idea of shame or where it came from. Actually, what it is, it's a noun, and it's just an association to a consciousness of a guilt or impropriety. And so you carry it around it was like a jacket that just didn't. It was tight and uncomfortable and scratchy. And yeah, I guess you adapt. So I mean, if you've gone through what I went through, you become adaptable. I mean, to survive, you have to become adaptable. So I suppose you adapt to your thoughts. You adapt to your emotions. You adapt to the dialogue going on there's a lot of dialogue going on in your head, you know. And again, it was all blocked out, but I do have memories of like in the book, I tell a story where we left this man's house where the sexual abuse began. And my friend and I there was a dialogue going on internally, but we were very quiet the whole way home because we both knew that it was wrong.
Yes, and then that childhood, so just to put into perspective, that your childhood left you very vulnerable for the next abuse to start to take place. And that was that four Kitchener-Waterloo men corralled 23 boys and persuaded us that our relationships was love. That is how desperate we were. That's how perverted they were. 2 years of abuse culminated in my kidnapping when they took me to Halifax. And you say we must all come to terms with our stories, whatever they are, and heal. Mm-hmm. And so you're speaking now about that part where you and this boy during that time did not utter a word because of the shame of what you knew happened and what you knew he knew had happened. Mm-hmm. Is there anything more you can say about that time, Doug?
So just, again, in context, I opened the book with that story, which was an article in the Toronto Star in April 2002, I think it was. And this is when this whole story came out. So my perspective then had changed dramatically towards the story, and it's even different now. So when I wrote the article, when I went public, all this stuff fell off, you know, the shame and the guilt and the anxiety, all the physical, emotional feelings I had towards it. In that story, I mean, we were just, for me, I mean, my parents split when I was 13. I threw my mom out of the house, literally. She was fighting with my dad. I picked her up. I carried her upstairs. I threw her outside. I called the police. They came. She never came back home. And then you go looking, you know, I joke, but I went looking for love in all the wrong places. And what's really bizarre about it is that, and I didn't realize this until I hired an investigator to find the men that abused me. I wanted to find, his name was Randy, and I wanted to find him because I felt bad for him, because he obviously had gone through something that caused him to do what he did to me. So the healing came really fast. I just changed my perception on the story. I just looked at it differently. I go, because I could have become him, right? And what I found out was he was 26 years old when he got arrested. So he was 23, 24 when it started, and probably started sooner for him. But in terms of these 23 boys, we were in Boy Scouts, and that's where they kind of hooked us. And another guy owned a Radio Shack store. And I looked, when I saw his age, I go, oh my gosh, like he's He's just a kid. He's like a young adult. I mean, you have children, and imagine your 26-year-old son. And so I didn't get a chance to find out his story, but undoubtedly, there's a story there for him.
Okay, now you're jumping ahead here.
It's my interview. I'm not letting her run the interview.
This is why I don't have the mic. People are like, okay, how did we get to that? Right? Okay, so I don't know about you, but are some of you wondering, how did you go from being kidnapped, having that experience, to wanting to find him? So so we're jumping. This wasn't the order I was planning on it, but we're with Doug, so we just go with it. So let me read you this. Page 99. I hired a private investigator to help piece my story together. He helped me find police records. He tried to find the address of the man who abused me the most. His name is Randy. He tried to track him down. The investigator asked me why I wanted to find him. I told him I wanted to sit down with him and find out what happened to him. I wanted to help him. I wanted to let him know he was okay. I didn't want him to take personally what happened to him, which caused him to do what he did to me and others. I never found him, but if I had, I would have hugged him and tried to help him. I know this is the only way to stop the cycle. Listen, I just have to say, if there's anybody in your life that you're having trouble forgiving, throw any excuses you have out the window. For you to get to, is it hard for you to wrap your head around this? Okay, can you explain the process for you to truly get to that point? Because I know you, and I know that is true. I know if he was here today, you would hug him, brings tears to my eyes, and you would forgive him. How did you get to that point?
I get emotional too when you read that. I really feel bad for him.
Really?
Yeah. So I guess there's a few things. Luckily for me, I left my second marriage. I wrecked my second marriage, and I left. I wrecked every relationship because I was so afraid. And I meet this counselor, her name was Ellen, and she was gifted. And she was the one that prompted the idea there was abuse. Because there was no family history answer. She's asking all the family history questions. There's no answers. And she says, I think there's abuse in your background. I go, there's no abuse in my background. Anyway, so she said, listen, if you want to work with me, I have a couple of conditions. And one was you have to tell the truth all the time, no matter what. But most importantly, you have to read this book. And I said, great, I love to read. What book? She says, The Four Agreements. So I go get the book, I read the book, and I come back a week later. She goes, what do you think of the book? I said, it's the dumbest thing I've ever read. And she says, go read the book again. So I read the book again. And each time I read it, I sat down for a couple hours, not a long read, and I read it again. I come back, I go, it's really weird. And it's because I was really uncomfortable with just where he was going, And then she says, go read it again. So the third read, and then I started to get it. And the biggest agreement, if anybody's read it, there's the four agreements: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions and create drama, and just always do your best. And it was a don't take things personally, because I took everything personally. I was very nervous and uncomfortable around people. I was anxious in crowds. It was really hard for me. You wouldn't have known it because I was a great actor. And I really just took on that idea of don't take it personally. And as I was studying Ruiz' book and his theories and the whole idea that, of course, I had made a bunch of agreements with myself about myself because of the mistakes I'd made, what I had gone through, what people thought of me, because they, of course, I was doing a good job of judging me, but of course people were judging me too. And I just loved that agreement. And so then these words came out of my mouth one day, and I said, this didn't happen because of me. It just simply happened to me. And I think one of the other gifts is that I was adopted, and I knew I was adopted at a young age, and so I could have been adopted into any family. I just happened to land in that family. So I was able to become very objective about the whole thing, and so I was able to step outside of myself and look at what that little boy went through. And I was also able to look at Randy and go, I wonder what that young man went through. And so it was really about the art of not taking anything personally. And that was the game changer for me.
One of the things that you just mentioned, and there's a chapter on it here that was part of your healing, is judgments. We talk a lot about that. My clients that are here, we dive into that. It's a core piece of our work. Can you tell me how you worked with judgments in your healing?
Well, it was, again, I think the beginning of the healing process started with the 4 agreements, and then that got me to go, or helped me to go public with it. So the story in the book was the Toronto Star, and then I was on Canada AM and some other TV shows and books and stuff. And just the essence of that book and not taking things personally, he talks a lot about it in the book. He calls it the judge. And so, when we were little and when I was little, we got judged very early. As soon as the adults, and I'll use some of his language because it's beautiful, as soon as they hooked your attention and started drilling in, rules, values, and beliefs. Now, mine were distorted, as you can imagine. And so he just talked about this judge. And so, it was like I was able to be an observer of the story, this objective observer. And so I'm learning this idea, this judge. And so I was really judging myself, of course, because of all the mistakes I made up till 39. Then when the story comes out, really judgmental. But then understanding, okay, I just have to let it go. And so when I wrote the book, before I started it, I wanted to go on a mission to end judgment. I remember talking to a pastor. I go, I'm going to freaking end judgment. He goes, you can't end judgment. I go, yes, I can. And what I realized, and a lot of it had to do with working with Bob Proctor, because he was the least judgmental man I've ever met. And he saw something in me. And so there's 2 stages. There's 2001, 2002 when the story comes out, and then there's 2014 up until this point with Bob mentoring me. But I just made my mind up in the chapter. I said, if I just stop judging other people and I make that a habit, because Bob kept saying, just treat everybody like the most important person in the world. Impression of increase. Just give, serve. Don't worry about anything, Doug. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about anything. Just go out and serve, 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 serve. And Gandhi said the same thing, serve, serve, serve. And so I just made it a habit to serve and to do good and just see the good in others. And that became the habit. And so then I stopped judging myself as much. Do I still judge myself? Yes. Do I judge others? Yes. But not as much. I catch myself if I do. And that was and then when people were judging me, I became immune. So, that's what the basis of the chapter in the book is. I didn't feel that way in 2001. I was very judgmental.
Another chapter in the book, which I love, is You're a Liar, and about the lies. You were lied to. Lying was lying was a habit for you. You lied all the time. Tell us about how you worked through that piece and when you understood how lies impacted your life.
Yeah, so, when you grow up in that kind of situation, you lie to stay safe. So, I'm lying to my mom about my dad. I'm lying to my dad about my mom. I'm lying to teachers and neighbors and family and friends to keep the story inside the house. The police arrive, I lie. So you were taught to lie. And what I realized is that when we all arrive here, it's in our nature. We're filled with love and integrity. That's in our nature. And I've always had this big heart, Like when you read that part about Randy, I get emotional, And so we're all filled with love and integrity, but then we're conditioned to operate a different way. So I learned to lie, and so I just didn't feel natural most of my life because I was lying, which is out of our nature. So if you don't feel good about yourself, stop lying. Stop lying to yourself, stop lying to other people. And because that is natural, is to just tell the truth all the time. And so, most of my life, I'm just, again, up until 39, I'm honest in every area of my life, every area. remember being in business with people, and I got in business with a couple of guys, and they were unethical. It really bothered me. But then I lied in my relationships. The only area I ever lied in was a relationship. Every other area, I was honest. And it was eating away at me. And I don't know what other men are like. I mean, I suppose I could guess, but when I did cheat, it just ate at me. I would get sick, my gut, my skin, it was really hard for me. And so then you're in this inner battle. So I've been in a inner battle my whole life because I was in conflict my whole life. That was the beginning of it. And then I realized, through awareness and study and working on trying to figure this all out, I realized, I said, it's not natural to lie. Neil Donald Walsh has in one of his books, he said, just tell the truth to everybody all the time about everything, and you'll be free. And so I wasn't religious or brought up with any religion or any relationship to God. And, a friend of mine who became a client first and became deep friends, and he kept, God, I couldn't stand it. We'd be out for pancakes. He'd start praying for me. He goes, Doug, I'm going to pray for us. I said, oh, God, here he goes again. I probably should have said, oh, God, but I'm going, oh, my God. And so he started dropping, saying, I just kept hearing, the truth shall make you free. And that resonated with me, but I didn't want to read the Bible or go to church, but I love that idea. The truth shall make you free. So I just carefully and strategically started telling the truth. And the more I told it was like a test. So I just kind of, let's try this and see if this works. And then I get a good reaction, and then I felt better about myself, so, yeah.
From this childhood, you mentioned that your mistaken identity was created. When did you realize that you had a mistaken identity?
So when I got into this work with Bob, so in 2014 I became a coach with him, and I wanted to work with him, I accomplished that fairly quickly, and I did not know, and many of you probably don't know, I didn't know. I was a pretty bright, intelligent guy. I mean, I was doing well in business before I met Bob, and of course I had it all together, right? And I had no idea that I have a gift called my mind, and I have the ability to control it and direct it. I did not know that. I did not know that my mind was a machine, and that I'm the operator of the machine, and that the mind actually directs the brain and nervous system. Well, my brain wasn't working very well because I was doing some dumb things, and I'm an intelligent guy. And I wasn't feeling good. My nervous system was out of whack. I'm going to naturopaths, I'm going try and diet. I'm doing all these different things to just calm down. And so Bob started talking to me, and he was so good at just coaching you. And then of course I discovered that what runs the machine is the self-image. And so I think Drina was in the back, and I think you asked me something. Maybe this morning we got here. 8 years ago, I was just flipping back through some journals. I had written down the word mistaken identity. This was just in the beginning of my coaching, because I'm coaching people like Hina does, and you sit down, you have a conversation, and I go, geez, I think everybody's got a self-image problem. I go, no, it's just me. Well, maybe, no, and because everybody I talk to, because I got really good at getting to the heart of what was going on for you. Like, I can get to you in a couple of minutes. Anybody want to have lunch? And so I just, I started to see that everybody was struggling with some distorted view on themselves. Like, I can think of all kinds of people. One guy, Jay, well, he's the guy praying for me at the Pancake House, right? And at a coffee shop, he tells me his dream and his goal. He's got this beautiful business, and he's got all this doubt, and I fell in love with the guy instantly. I go, oh my God. And I said, I'm weeping at the coffee shop. I said, dude, if you don't do this, I'm going to kick your ass. Because he was just this beautiful guy and a beautiful idea, and he had everything to pull it off. And so I just realized that all these people have a mistaken view, and I can see. I have a gift like Bob had, which is he has the ability to see in people what they feel but they don't believe. if somebody was coaching me, or like when Bob was coaching me, like sometimes he would just kick my butt, you know? And he was right. Like, I'm not a victim. I was a victim up until I was 15 years old when I got returned home after the kidnapping. I was a victim of my own self-abuse by, drugs and alcohol till I was 23. I was a victim of my own mistakes getting into business and, failing miserably and going bankrupt. But I'm not a victim. And then again, I'm fine. Like, I'm relatively healthy. I look pretty good for 75, right? No. I'm relatively healthy. I'm doing well in life. I have good friends, and I have a good life. I have no excuse to say I'm a victim. I have none. And so I just got fed up with the victim mentality.
Okay. I have more questions about this, because I know people are like, okay, we get taking 100% responsibility at work. Yes, you can phone the people and tell them that, yes, I apologize. But I think the part that's hard is are you saying that you take 100% responsibility for what happened to you as a child? Like, how do you take responsibility for that?
No, I don't take responsibility for what happened to me. What happened to me should not happen to children. Children continue to be mistreated, neglected. They call them adverse childhood experiences. And actually, I was looking up some more numbers. It's 92% of victims know their abuser. Right? So it's plain wrong that it happens. But I'm responsible for my victim mentality. I remember there's a part in the book, I think, I'm sitting in the courthouse, and I'm 15, and I might have to be called to testify in front of the men. At that time, of course, I'm scared. And there was another little boy that came out after the story, came on the paper, and he was being abused by one of the same men I was. This guy was, he's in jail, dangerous offender. He'll be in jail for life. And this little boy, he wasn't when he was 13, hanging low, sweaty palms, just like me. And he wanted to go public with his story. His mom and him saw my story in the Kitchener newspaper, and he wanted to go public with it. But you're not allowed to go public because his identity is covered up to protect the victim. And so that just hit me back then. I go, the system is perpetuating the victim mentality. Because if they had treated me differently and responded differently, and the dialogue and the narrative that was given to me at the time when I was 15, my perception on the story would have been different. Now that's
different from early on, as opposed to changing your perception much later.
Yeah, and that's a logical viewpoint. So what I learned is I have the ability, my rational thinking mind can control my unconscious mind. And so I thought, I'm just going to be logical about all this. And it's illogical for me to carry around a victim mentality because I don't feel good. And then if I don't feel good, I can't do very good. I can't work with you and be the best if I'm suffering. How can I help your suffering if I'm suffering? And I was sick of suffering. So, no, I was a victim when I was a child. Yes, it's not my fault. It didn't happen because of me. It simply happened to me. It could have happened to any little boy. It happened to happen to me because I landed in that family and I landed in that Radio Shack store. But it's not about me.
But what you are responsible for is your victim mentality as an adult.
Correct.
I think that's a really important distinction. That is huge. You are responsible for your victim mentality. I imagine that there was such freedom in that because then you don't have to recreate it and recreate being the victim again once you take responsibility for your victim mentality.
Yeah. The other thing I didn't know is that, so I never understood forgiveness. And in fact, I've realized very few people do. True forgiveness is forgetting. What do you mean? Like forget it, Doug? Yeah, that's true forgiveness. That's the art of forgiveness. But we're not taught that way. We're taught to dredge up the past. We dredge it up for ourselves. We dredge it up against others. We use it against other people. We use it against ourselves. And so when I got that, I go, like, I just got to forget it. Now, I recall it. My memory recalls it because I wrote the books. I had to recall memory to write, but I don't think about it anymore. I don't talk, like Bob says, stop talking about it. Bob, it's not that easy. Okay, Doug. Right? And so the idea of the art of forgiveness, of forgetting it, means that I just don't take my mind back to it. Because if you do, if there's negative associations to your memory, I remember this Wallace Wattles in The Science of Getting Rich talked about it too. I picked it up there. And if I kept going back to the past, I'm going to trigger the emotions. And a lot of people, I talk to a lot of people, and they say, I'm triggered by my past. I go, yeah, because you haven't forgiven the past. No, Doug, I've got this and I got that. This, I'm taking these pills. But I said, you got it wrong. I'm sorry. You don't have to feel the way that you feel. You are in charge of how you feel. Now, people don't like that when I say that, because you're locked into a narrative that is a long-term narrative that's been running for about 50 plus years. Post-war psychology went a certain direction, and there's this widely accepted fallacy that you can't take control of your unconscious with your thinking mind, and that's not true. I found out that it's true, and so I just said I'm just going to practice the art of forgiveness, which is forgetting. Don't look backwards on the past.
It makes me think of Maxwell Maltz in Psycho-Cybernetics, where he talks about therapeutic forgiveness, which is to forget. It is to let go. And he would say it would be like having a wound, and if you're not letting it go, it can't heal. The wound cannot heal. It's like having an open wound then, if you're going to forgive but not forget. So that piece is very important. And it was like what Bob would say that Michael Beckwith had said about harvest the good, what is it? Harvest, it is what it is, harvest the good, and then forgive the rest. Yeah. Let it go. Yeah. And you say on page 74, when I started to see my abuse as a gift, I was lighter. That was a turning point. How did you start to see your abuse as a gift?
See, it's just a perception change. I started to look for the gifts, because there has to be, and I didn't know this till I started studying what Hina teaches so well on her team, what Bob taught me. Maxwell Maltz, I think that is the owner's manual on your mind and your life. If you don't feel good, get that book. Get mine first. I make it faster and easier. I do it in 30 days. It took me years with him. No, I'm kidding. I just started to look for the gifts, and what was happening, unbeknownst to me, and then when it became apparent, I got really uncomfortable. I started working with people, and because I have no degrees, I didn't go to school. I barely got into grade 10. I have no degrees at all, but I have a high degree of experience. I've experienced everything. The only thing I don't think I've done, I haven't gone to war, and I didn't do heroin. But I've been adopted, I've been abused, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, bankruptcy, failed marriages, health problems, the whole shebang. I've done it all, I feel. So I'm very experienced. Somebody called me a teacher. I spoke at a high school. He said, this is the best presentation we've ever seen at the school. We have a lot of speakers. He said, you're a cognitive authority. I go, what the hell does that mean? And so he explained it. And so I was using my experience, so I would just get right to you. Drina right here, she knows that. I have the ability to get right to your story really fast. And how I do it, I just open wide up. And I'm very open, I'm very non-judgmental. And where was I going with that? Abuse as a gift, thank you. That's why she's in charge. I just started to look for the gifts in it, and people were, as I was helping people, they were saying, "Wow, Doug, you're really gifted." And I remember calling Bob one day. I said, "Bob," I said, people keep telling me I'm gifted, and I was very uncomfortable with the idea people complimenting me. He says, "You are gifted, Doug." I said, "I am?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Everybody is gifted." He said, "You're using yours." And so I just looked for the gifts, and then the gifts started coming back, because I started handing gifts out to people the gift of what I saw in them, and the gift of how I believed in them, and the gift of getting them to just take some action on what their heart was telling them, and then I started getting gifts back. But it's happened earlier than that. I just decided to, again, through the 4 agreements, I started to look for the good in it all. There had to be good. There had to be. And I was a good little boy.
Oh, say more about that.
Well, I was when I got all my records. So when the article came out, I had done this investigation. I got police records. I got my adoption records. I got records from Children's Aid and all the intervention. And there was a one of the records said when I was put on foster care, I was 11, I think, and they said Doug was described as a happy, good little boy with a kind way about him or something like that. And so I'm reading the evidence, right? The evidence is saying I was this good little boy, and the situation, though, was saying something different. And so it wasn't, I'm looking at that little boy. Like, when I get emotional, if I do about the story, I don't get emotional about me. I get emotional about that little boy that I once knew.
And for context, Doug was in foster care because at one point with his adoptive parents, he was removed. You and your brother were removed from the home for a few years, was it? And then, or
no, just a couple of months.
A couple of months to a farm. And even those moments where other people entered your life was a gift, from some teachers to that foster family too, and others along the way. And you are now a parent. You dedicate this book to your daughter. I think there's many haunting scenes in this book, Doug. One is when you're a young boy and your father, I think I got this right, drags you down to the basement. He's got your mom. He gets the shotgun, puts it to your mom's throat, and says, "This is how you treat women," or "This is how you keep women in line." And you say in the book that you are grateful that you did not take that on as a way of being. There were some things you did take on and some things you didn't. How did that childhood impact you as a father?
Well, I remember, first off, I didn't really want to be a father. There's a chapter called "I'm Going to Be a Father," because I get this message from that guy that Jay introduced me to, that God guy. And when I got the message, it was like this. I looked up at the sun. It was like whoosh, this rush of this buzz went through me. And literally, I just said to myself, "I'm going to be a father."
Okay, so we just have to pause. When he says, "I got the message," people are like, "What, did you get a text? Did you get an email?" Like, who is giving you this message? Did somebody say, "Oh, the pregnancy test came"? It's not what he's talking about. So can you please provide some context for the people of this message?
Sorry. I'm at a campground. It was a May-long weekend. It was 2002, so the story was out. And we were just walking. It was a friend that I felt safe with. So I'm walking back from the beach, and there's these 2 young boys or sons, and I look back, and they're just playing along the path. They're jumping and skipping and laughing and playing. And I look back at them, and I look up at the sun, and then I get this buzz. I look back at them again, and I go, "I'm going to be a father." I went away to Vancouver on business that weekend, and I was reading a book called Carolyn Myss about archetypes, and I was thinking about this whole father message, right? And I didn't believe in God, but I feel like I got the message from God, And when I come home, and my girlfriend at the time, Ede's mom, she announced that she's pregnant, and it all happened within that weekend. She's scared, right? Because we were on again, off again. I kept breaking up because I didn't feel good enough about myself. And that's sort of the story. What was the first question?
about how you are as a father with
right.
this upbringing.
Yeah, well, so I'll be honest. I mean, I'm very wide open. I remember when Eden was 2 or 3 years old, there was questions running through my mind. Am I going to abuse her? It was just old questions, because we have these old questions, and so it was certainly on my mind. But the gift that I have is that I have a really big heart, and I'm just so filled with love, you know. I just didn't love myself, but so I had all these doubts, and I just made my mind up that I was a kid that struggled, and I became an adult that struggled, and then Eden was going to come along, and I got to end the struggle, because otherwise I'm going to raise a kid that struggles. And again, it was all decision. I go, I'm not friggin' doing that. And then God bless my parents. I mean, you know, my dad was a pretty broken guy. He worked in a factory. My mom sold Tupperware drunk up and down the street. I'm not going to be them, you know. And that was the gift that they gave me, because they gave me some perspective. So it was just decision. I just thought, I'm going to be a really good father. And I'm a wonderful father, even in spite of wrecking that marriage with her mom and what I did. And I talk about this in the book, because she kicked my butt. Eden said, Dad, you have to promise to tell me the truth no matter what. And that was very shortly after I left. And we had a chat the other night. And she said, you kept your promise. And I just said, I'm going to be honest with you about everything. And she asked me all kinds of questions. She was brutal. Like, she's a real strong young lady. And it was all decision. I thought, I've always been a walk the talk guy, you know, like in business. I was always the guy that did it first, proved it, and then guided others. And I thought, it's an integrity thing. I have no right to pontificate about, you know, being a great father unless I am one. And
Again, decision.
Yeah.
That's one of the common themes in your story, is when you made decisions and things shifted. I remember this story that Bob would talk about with Doug when it came to decision. So just imagine Doug is in Bob's office, and he's got this piece of paper. And on this piece of paper are a lot of questions that he has for Bob. And he's like, well, so, you know, Doug's sitting there, I've got questions. And he pulls out his piece of paper, and there's all these questions on there. 3 pages. He had questions. 3 pages. And Bob just looked at him, takes the piece of paper, and what happened, Doug?
He took the 3 sheets of paper, he looked at me, he tore them into a bunch of pieces, he threw them in the garbage. He said, you know what, you're fucking...
Yes.
Bob does swear.
He does swear.
You know what, yeah, yes. You know what your problem is? Is you can't make a friggin' decision. And he said, if I answer these 15 questions, you're going to come back with another 15 questions.
Yes.
He said, if you want to work with me, you make a decision right now. Otherwise, the meeting is over. And he stood up. And so I made a decision right on the spot. And I became a very good decision maker. But I still had a lot of questions for a little while. They started to slow down over time.
And that was a gift that Bob gave you in that moment, was not to pander to your questions, because it was insatiable. You would never have enough information. Yeah. And the way that he was seeing you was as somebody that could make the decision and was worthy of the decision, of the yes in that moment. How did that decision affect your life, having Bob as a mentor and friend?
Big time. When he passed, we were asked to do a video and talk about how Bob impacted your life. And I said that he left me in a really good place. I love what you said about pandering to questions. So I pandered a lot of questions about myself. I pandered a lot of questions about, going forward, succeeding. Bob charged me with running his coaching division. And I remember as you were positioning the question, I remember he would always tell these stories to make his point, to get me to make decisions. I remember one time in his backyard, he told a story, which he told a story to many, many people. It's funny, Gina, I was thinking about it. I never did ask Gina if Bob ever would have said this or not, but this is my answer. And so he was telling a story about how he was working for Earl Nightingale, and he was up here in Canada. Earl was down in Chicago, and he was selling lead the field programs, records like crazy. And he said, Doug, I just made my mind up that I was going to elect myself the vice president of sales for the Nightingale Conant Corporation. I opened up an office. I got business cards made up, and I started helping the other coaches and consultants. And he winked at me. He said, that would probably be a good idea. And so that's what I started doing. Now, I didn't open an office. I didn't get business cards made up. But I just started helping the other coaches because I want to be the number one guy. That was on my goal card. So I'm the top consultant in the world. I'm the Roger Bannister of Procter Gallagher Institute, and I'm working side by side with Bob Proctor. So I joined in May 2014. I wrote that goal, and by the end of August, I was the international sales director. And so he did those things. He would tell these stories, and I thought, I think he's talking to me, right? And so I think I learned that. I mean, I would have not written this book without him until I really understood the Let It Go chapter. And it took me almost 7 years to understand what he meant, that just let it go, and it's really friggin' simple. And so I now tell people, like the book, I designed the book. It's not a book to read. It's a handbook. It is a guide to letting go fast. It's 30 chapters, 30 stories, 30 key points, and 30 little action steps to get you. What I got to do is I hook your attention with the story. I change your mind in the story. I get you to think differently because a lot of things you think and believe are off track. And then while I got your mind changed, I get you to take an action step. And because if you take action in the right direction, you get a reaction, you're on the right track. And so I would have never written the book until I finally go, oh my God, this was so easy. It happened. It could happen so fast. I made it so complicated. As Bob goes, Doug, you're making this so complicated. No, Bob, you don't understand. Okay, Doug, whatever you say. And so I think one of the other chapters is called Things Were Delicate, and you mentioned earlier, and people ask me, what's my favorite chapter? It's the one chapter that moves me the most emotionally. It's not a long chapter. It's just really talking about, teachers along the way that saw something in me that I did not see. Some protected me, some encouraged me. Mr. Feeney, my grade 10 English teacher, who held me accountable. I mean, how does a guy that doesn't finish grade 10 English write a book? And the book is really good. I mean, and I said no because the publisher said that. They go, did you write this? I go, yeah. And I give them the manuscript. Was this your first pass? I go, yeah. And so I have these, and then Bob, of course, was one of the most delicate. So he saw something in me. He got me to believe it. He backed me up. He kicked my butt. And he got me to take action to prove that he was right about me. And he was right, and I was wrong.
He was right.
Yeah.
And he was right. And I think, so first of all, just to reiterate what Doug said about the book, it's not a book that you're going to sit and read. It's a book that you are going to literally be with. And what Doug has at the end of every chapter is an opportunity to reflect and action steps that you can take so you can integrate it and embody the work. As we bring this part to a close, I do want to read the dedication because I do love it.
I've had enough crying, and I think I'm... Go ahead.
This book is dedicated to my daughter. You came into my life at just the right time, and I realized I was worth more than I felt I was. You inspired me to be a better man, a better father, and a better person to help the world. Doug, that's what this book is doing. That's what you're doing. nobody in this room is going to leave here the same as when they entered the room because of your presence, because you had the courage to tell your story. I don't know what it was like to go back there. You have a different perspective now. And there are times when you read something and it gives you the courage through someone else's story to take action, to move on those dreams, to really forgive yourself. This book does that. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I add one thing?
Pardon me?
Can I add one thing?
You can add as many as you want.
Okay. A couple things. Stop trying to fix yourself. Okay? One of the chapters in the book, there's nothing wrong with me. I asked that question a lot my whole life, and I never got an answer because there's nothing wrong with me. So stop trying to fix yourself. Be yourself. And the book, if you get the book, don't work on yourself. Okay? Let the book work on you. I put about 140 people through what I call an observational trial. They got the book early, they read the book, and then they went through each chapter over 30 days and then reported their feedback. We're still staying in touch. We're going to track them for the next year. And I just kept saying, just let the book work on you. And that's the way I designed it. And that's the most effective use of it. And if you get it and you don't like it, give it away. If it stirs you, because it can stir you, it can cause resistance in you, and recognize what the resistance is. Right. So today in our world, we don't like to not feel good, and it's perpetuated by a lot of different things. There's nothing wrong with not feeling good. There's nothing wrong with being depressed and anxious. Nothing. It can be temporary if you look at it the right way. But when you get into this book, it's going to stir a physical and emotional state in you. And what's happening is I'm changing your mind and your conditioning and your upbringing and your psyche and your ego don't like change. So I just want you to, if you do read the book, I just want to reassure you, if something is happening, it's good, even though it doesn't feel good. So just let the book work on you if you get the book.
And before we officially wrap up, do we have any questions? I know it was yes, Natalie.
Thank you for your story and sharing with us that so openly. You talk about forgetting, and there's this St. Francis of Assisi prayer where at the end it says, through self-forgetting one finds. And I wondered, you also talk about that therapist, Ellen, who helped you talk about what was like forgotten, what was maybe repressed. And I wonder, how does one discern between what we need to just forget, so we're not in that perpetual self-fixing mode, versus what needs to be worked on? How do you discern in yourself between those two?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Anything negative, you need to forget. That's it. So here's what I discovered. This was more working with other people, because it was interesting. I was able to get people unstuck fast, right, and permanent. Yet I was still dragging it out, right? And so what I discovered was whatever's in the past, you don't have to go looking at it. You don't have to dredge up your story. You don't have to go to therapy. You don't have to analyze it all. You can, but you don't necessarily need to. I think it's good to assemble this story because it explains a lot, right? You go, like, that's what happened to me. When I had the whole story, I go, well, no wonder I feel the way I feel, and I've been doing what I'm doing. No wonder I was, cheating, wrecking every relationship, running away. It was obvious, right? So I think that's beneficial. But I just basically, I say anything that's negative, you don't, there's nothing in your past that you need. And if there is, it'll show up as you go forward. But here's our problem. We are conditioned and brought up to look at the past. Remember we took that trip to the campground 20 years ago? Oh my God, that was so much fun. And it was Wallace Wattles in Science Against Rich. He said, don't look on the past in any way, shape, or form, whether it's negative or positive. Now, our memory brings up memories, but don't go looking for memories. Because if you're always looking at the past with guilt or resentment, or you're replaying your story, especially if they're negative, the way your mind works, it uses that information to evaluate how you should go forward. And so if you're stuck, you got to stop looking at the past. And so I just say, the problem with therapy, I believe, is that you just keep talking about the story. It's always about the past. It's never about the future. I mean, you talk about the future, but it's always referenced by the past. And so I think you just got to decide, enough is enough. You get what you need and go, I got what I need and I'm moving on. But we like to be victims. It's very convenient. It makes up good excuses. You get the drift with my answer? Yeah.
I think we'll do 2 more questions. Yeah.
When you describe being ready for a change mentally, and some of the changes are really quite profound, did you find that maybe your emotions were lagging behind? So it would be something where you're like, no, I've decided I'm ignoring that thought and I'm moving in this direction, and it's sort of like a fake it till you make it scenario?
Yeah, so one of the chapters is called The Elephant in the Room. And so a friend of mine, Pete, so it was my Eeyore years, 2016, 2017. I met him at Starbucks through a friend, and he was always there. I'd walk in and, hey, Doug, how you doing? I'm fine, Pete. How are you? I'm good, Doug. What's going on? And my emotions were running my dialogue and my thinking. He said, you ever hear the story about the elephant in the room, or the elephant? I go, no. And he said, well, an elephant's your emotions are like an elephant. You're left untamed. They're reckless, and they can trample everything, cause all kinds of damage, hurt people. He said, your emotions are like an elephant. Your emotions are running your thinking. And that really hit me. And so I just made my mind up. I go, nope. I do not look backwards on the past. I do not worry about the future. And I refuse to let my emotions run my thinking. Because you have emotional responses to the past, which hijack your thinking, which distort your present and your future. And that doesn't work. It's not the way it works. Your mind doesn't work that way. Your mind is a machine, and you better operate it the way it runs by certain rules. So I figured I better follow the rules. And talking about the past and getting emotional and running my thinking, that's not following the rules on the machine.
Okay, I haven't read the book, but
You can get it today, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can get it autographed.
And you get an autograph, yeah.
excited to get it and read it. My question is, I'm so curious to know, what happened with your adoptive parents, and you said you had a brother, and what kind of relationship do you have, if any, with any of them? Like, what happened? Yeah,
my dad passed when I was 23, and my mom passed when 99. She passed. She had cancer, lung cancer, and there's a couple little stories in the book. I wanted to put in the book the gifts they gave me, and also the forgiveness that came. That I forgave them, and because I didn't want people just to think they were bad people. They were good people that just came from a bad place, and they had their own story and their own struggles, and I don't blame them for what they did and the mistakes they made. My brother, he was adopted too, so we weren't actually. He was there before I got there. I think he had been adopted a year earlier. And so he's doing well. His version of the story is much, much different because I was the little devil and he was the little angel. So I was born on Devil's Night. That in Canada used to be called Devil's Night, day before Halloween. And my brother was born the day before Valentine's. And so my mom said, Tommy Dane, you're such a little angel. Dougie Dane, you're such a little devil. And I fulfilled that prophecy. So my brother's view on the story is much different. He didn't endure what I endured. It was much different for him. And anyway, he's doing well. He struggled in relationships as well. He didn't pick up all the lying because he didn't have to lie like I did. So he was very honest in his relationships, but very insecure. And he got married young, and they're still together. They have grown children, and they made it through. There was several times where they were split and got back together. But he's doing well, and we're close. We don't see each other a lot, but he doesn't live far from me. He was over on Sunday, and we have this beautiful relationship because when we were little boys, we were looking after each other, and so that sustained itself. So yeah, he's doing well. Yeah.
Marnie will give you the final question.
Okay.
I also was a child of an alcoholic, and so my feeling is like, Hina knows the first time I ever met her, just this feeling of utter chaos, that constantly, abuse as well, sexual abuse in my childhood, this constant, like my nervous system is constantly geared up for chaos, and if you have an alcoholic parent, that there's just always chaos. How do you quiet that storm or voice?
Have you ever had an injury that's left you with pain, like a limp or anything like that? Or anybody have a sports injury? Anybody? It's perspective. So it's interesting because I was in a situation at Christmas last year, and I was at Starbucks, and I'm having this conversation by text, and I'm holding my coffee, and so I'm sweating. When I'm nervous, I sweat. And I used to give myself a hard time that I perspired. There's a chapter in the book called "Sweaty Palms, Big Heart," and I came to terms with the fact that when I'm in the public eye, I perspire. I saw T.D. Jakes. You ever know T.D. Jakes? Big black preacher, right? He sweats like crazy, right? The suit's soaking wet. I go, well, if he can sweat, I can sweat, right? And so I changed my perspective on that. During this conversation, I'm dripping like crazy. I go home to my partner. I go, I just discovered something. Anybody in a position of authority over me that's coming at me negatively is a trigger. And so what I do is I look for the triggers, so I'm aware of them, but it's just a physical response, right? And Bob, I have a cocktail napkin, and he didn't write it for me, but somebody gave me the cocktail napkin and said, you think of yourself as a human being attempting to or searching for a spiritual experience. But in fact, you're actually a spiritual being attempting to cope with a human experience. To see yourself from the point of spirit. And so I keep trying to remind myself that I'm a spiritual being living in a physical body. And so it's just a physical response. There's nothing wrong with me. And so I've just kind of like having a limp. It's an injury from the past, and I just live with it. But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing. I mean, if we were all honest with each other about what's going on for you right now internally, we're all struggling with something, right? And that's okay. It's okay if you're struggling on the inside. There's nothing wrong with you. You're struggling. You want to end the struggle and the suffering, and you can. So I don't. You know what? I just decided to lighten up. I was just taking things so friggin' seriously. Oh my God. I got sick of myself. I literally got, I went to my backyard. I have this beautiful house. I went out in the backyard, and I had a conversation with myself. I sat down in the chair, and he was over there, this other guy that, I'm still having to live with. And I said, now listen, Doug, and I'm like this. I'm loud, right? I got a couple glasses of wine in me. I go, enough is enough. And I just started giving this guy hell. I said, I'm in charge. And I picked that up from Michael Singer, Untethered Soul. I said, I'm sick of this inner roomie. I call him my cellmate. And so she's going to be with you the whole time. But you're in charge. And that's just a choice. It's all decision. It's all perspective. And your judgment is run by your perception. I close the book with that. It's just remember these two words, perception and judgment. You can perceive anything any way you want, and that will form your judgment, and that ultimately determines how you feel. Just say, get your act together, take control of your life and your thinking, and get on with your life, because you're going to wake up one day and you're going to die. And you're going to go, oh my God, I wish I would listen to that Dane guy 20 years ago.
I remember I was saying something to Bob about like a goal I had, and he said, well, when do you want to do that? I said, like 3 years. And he's like, 3? Yeah, Gina's laughing because she knows. He was like, 3 years? You could be dead. And I was kind of looking at Bob, like, because, you know, he's much older than I am, and he's telling me this, but that's the way he lived, right? It's like, get on with your life. Get on with your life. And if part of getting on with your life is getting a book, come up front, say hello to Doug. We'll get you all set up so you can buy a book. If getting on with your life is joining our community, our program, talk to one of our coaches here. And if getting on your life is, I get to have a hug with you, I would really welcome that as well. Doug, my friend.
Hina, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.